For months, a single game has stood unshakable at the top of the games page, hosting tens of thousands of players at a time, all around the clock: Jailbreak. So immovable, so populated, it makes some people absolutely furious over its success. Others, so tired at its status of being the best that they just want it to go away. But will it ever? The question is, could Jailbreak remain #1 forever? Short answer, no. Why? Let's get into the long answer and talk about how it's #1. There's got to be a reason it's popular, right? So what makes a game popular? And no, it's not just because a bunch of little kids are being tricked into playing it. Let's pull a page from the history books on this one. Jailbreak was the first game to ever hit 1 billion plays, but back in 2009 the first game to break a huge milestone was Mike's Paintball, which surpassed 1 million. This game was such a mainstay for a long time, and it even took up all the time I spent playing Roblox for a while. How did it earn its reputation as most veteran players' favorite game, including me? A game of Mike's Paintball went something like this. You spawn on one of two teams and you're given a single gun. Nothing told you what to do really, just go out and rack up kills if you feel like it. There's some complexity to it. The gun has 3 fire modes: standard, sniper, and burst fire, and way over on the other side of the map is an enemy flag, which you can capture for more points. Yeah, the concept was simple, but it was fun and everyone knew how to have a good time with it. The people who really wanted a decent, easy to learn shooter could play around for hours at this. You already see the parallels between this and Jailbreak. 2 games that players of all ages and skill levels embrace and put you into a map right away with little guidance. But see, there's a catch with a popular game. As more people want to try it out, get hooked, and the player base gets diverse, not everything stays the same. In Mike's Paintball, you get a bucket load of new players, and they're either mostly unhelpful trying to understand what to do and how to aim, or they're arguing with the more experienced and calling them cheap. On the other hand, eventually all the tips and tricks of the game are figured out. So when you catch a bunch of new people unaware of the fact that there's a secret rocket launcher floating in the river around the perimeter of the map, and it travels right to the enemy base, you get some days where you're just... surprise! Bored. A popular game loses its luster when there's a lot of individuals who hinder the experience a bit. On top of that, Mike's Paintball specifically had a problem with just breaking. Time rounds stopped working after a Roblox update, then went the capture the flag mechanic, and essentially it just became an arena of people screaming and fighting with each other for no good reason. Mike stopped visiting Roblox and did nothing to fix it, but that's okay. He had his lucky break and made the most popular game on the site. It was a mastery of game design in that age. Don't get me wrong, Mike's Paintball is still a nostalgic experience in my eyes. Though the game suffered from having a bloated player base, I think to myself still, why did I enjoy it, and why did I put up with it for so long? It has to be something about the game's design, and that boils down to 2 things: roles and depth. I'll talk about these throughout the video, and to pick one to start with is so hard because it applies to nearly every popular game there ever was. Let's dissect Mike's Paintball first. How can a simple paintball game be a perfect example of roles? Well, I said that the paintball gun had 3 modes, and depending on what style of firing you felt comfortable with, you essentially made a place for yourself. Now! For example, a person who could aim really well with the sniper mode would typically hang out in the upstairs of the base and fire it at others from far away the whole game. It's prehistoric Call of Duty. Okay. Burst fire was one of the most reliable ways to wipe out players at close range, and so these folks were in the front lines. They could harass opponents at their base and one-shot them with their powerful shotgun spread. To be skilled and efficient with such a simple gun was the goal of every dedicated player. People like to build experience. Their reward is being better than everyone else playing. What other games center around roles? Back in the day, around 2009 and 2010, build and live as a blank games were everywhere, in a bunch of different settings, and it was up to you to make a home for yourself and your fellow settlers, and live within this certain chosen community. You often came back and had favorite places to build in. A game like Juggernaut by OzzyPig had someone being the main enemy, others picking them off, but also classes like a warrior and a medic to spread out the roles of an effective team. Apocalypse Rising had what I call soft roles, like bandits and heroes, and had a visible status and achievements with holding that role for so long. I believe that game even took a hit in popularity when the creators took out the heroes in the first edition. It made the game a lot more hostile and competitive rather than cooperative. So if you're there to wander and you're not in a group with other people who want to kill others, does it remain fun? Sometimes it's the exclusivity of roles that draws people to a game. People stick around for several rounds in a row in the murderer to be the murderer themselves. In the old days, we had a prototype of that genre called Deception Infection by Stickmaster Luke, and it had the same principle of thinking, ooh, when am I going to be the person who tries to get everybody? Even if you weren't into shooting and surviving, look at the Draw Something games and how awesome it was to be the artist sketching what everyone had to guess. Hide and Seek Extreme is always all about being the seeker. To be the judge in a fashion runway place is a special privilege. It's the highlight to playing in those types of games. Know what else revolves around roles? Role-playing. Whether it's being a family, inside a medieval setting, taking place in a school, or carried out with a bunch of animals, you take on a role to play these types of games. And it's not about playing a role well, it's about playing it creatively instead. And when people can really get into what options the game offers them, everyone genuinely has fun. When you occupy a role, you want to have fun playing within it. It needs to suit your style and your expectations. When Roblox was starting up in 2007, another online game was becoming a mainstay, Team Fortress 2, the preliminary class-based first-person shooter. I've been playing it myself since 2011, right when it became free to play, and I've racked up a ridiculous amount of hours in it over 8 years. I got hooked on playing a couple classes, serving a role, and dedicated myself to improving at them, and so have a lot of other players who have kept TF2 as a popular game for over a decade. Overwatch follows the same successful formula, with more classes but to similar effect, options to give players to try, and favorite picks to eventually become skilled at. The point is with all these examples is that Jailbreak distinctly has the same setup. The sides between cop and robber, between red and blue, teachers and students, bandits and heroes, infected and survivors. You get the idea. I think Work at a Pizza Place by Dude 1 is a perfect example of how a game becomes popular. This game was around since my early playing days in 2009, and it stayed number 1 for weeks. There was never a game that had such important, diverse roles that everyone had to chip into at the pizza making and delivery process. For a long time, Dude 1 was inactive, and for maybe 2011 to 2013, it was gone. Empty. But he came back and revived it, modernized it, made it a permanently played game, and gave it the second ingredient to make it last. Depth. Now all the work you're doing is meant for something, paying for your own customized house. In the first version, everyone had a house but could only spend their money on the same furniture that just popped into place with the press of a button. Roles make the game interesting to play, and depth, which in this case is the furniture you can earn, makes it worthwhile to play for a long time. So depth basically equals the amount of experience you can gain by playing a game continuously. There's either physical rewards for being accomplished or there's more invisible ones like skill when it comes to stuff like shooters. That gets me to another point. At times, two certain varieties of games were always dancing around the top spots in popularity, tycoons and obbies. But a single one of these games didn't stick around for long, and hardly any are actually really memorable. You can argue that most of the problem was poor quality, free models, and rehashed mechanics, so when you had exceptions like Defalcio's Tycoons, those games had a little longer lifespan, but they're still not as dependent on roles and depth. You essentially play these games in isolation by yourself, with either the sole task to make money, for basically making more money, or to die a couple times on your way through a straight path for a temporary reward. There's no lasting impression left on a player, and fortunately, as developers these days look for ways to get people playing their creations for extended periods, they understand these old concepts have generated less success. Even new players these days want to be entertained by something more complex. Enter Jailbreak, the perfect storm. With its giant map, host of activities to do, and easy to learn gameplay, you don't have to do much else to describe Jailbreak. The scripting is pretty reliable and just about everything has a degree of interactivity. I think the promising thing about it is that there's often a goal you set for yourself for the future. I'll admit it's not the most particularly challenging, either driving around or pressing buttons is what you mostly do, but this game often requires teamwork to get very far. People hop into a server with a friend all the time because there's strength in numbers, and not to mention it takes strategy and planning to raid a location, or else you're like me getting arrested immediately. In the end, I'm not the craziest about it, but I can certainly see why people like it, and why it has the replay value to keep it going strong until the end of time. Supposedly. You wanna know something funny? Ask anyone who joined when Work at a Pizza Place was updated whether they thought that game would stay number 1 forever. It didn't, though everyone was really convinced it would. The same goes for Murder Mystery when we thought that type of game was the new standard. In 2014, LOL Eris was supposed to be dominating the game's page with his mad paintball, minigames, and murderer places, so much that he could quit school to keep focusing on the development. And yet, he doesn't own the single biggest game anymore either. Popular games fizzle out, if not because they get old or break, but because people will eventually tire of the concept. They become too adjusted to playing a role that it gets boring, or there's nothing really else to achieve. Already with Jailbreak, some people are realizing that the roles of cop and robber are getting a little old and repetitive in some ways. Collecting sick vehicles and skins is a decent amount of depth. But what does that make a player feel when some things are always just going to be unachievable? And do people even play Jailbreak's roles closely anymore? The prison itself is virtually empty. All the cops often abandon their posts to chase down the robbers, who just expect someone to give them a keycard so they can start running around anyway. It's more interesting out there in that big open map. It's definitely far from the simulated life in prison that Asimo 3089 borrowed from other games of the same success. It's points like these that seem to get people irritated with Jailbreak. I know that one of the other popular things to do is bash it, but why? I see critiques like it's repetitive and simple, and like I said, I can sort of accept that. Honestly though, it seems like being a rebel and going against the crowd by hating Jailbreak is the second most popular thing to do. But Jailbreak must be doing something right to be in the position that it has had for over a year at this point. And what about all the game genres that seem like they're outside all the things I've been talking about? Survival disasters, minigames, and simulators? This brings a couple more key things to light. One factor is constant updates. Jailbreak's developers are always coming back in to insert new features, locations, or fix some issues. I think at this point in time they're actually developing a museum heist, so there's always a way to bring players back in. But one of Jailbreak's biggest aspects in my mind, and what also goes for any popular game, is the variety of experiences you get every time you load it up. There's something exciting about the intense chases, finding a good partner to work with, or having the unexpected happen. This is why it's a YouTuber's or a streamer's favorite game of choice. Dear God, do people know how to farm it. Jailbreak is a sandbox that encourages you to have fun beyond the routine work to rob a store or chase down a criminal. And in a way, because it's popular in the first place, and there's always new people coming in to encounter, it never seems to go stale or repeatable in the end. A popular game needs variety, the spontaneous and the unpredictable things to happen. When I don't feel like trying hard as a scout or babysitting the team as a medic in TF2, there's always other classes, ways to screw around, make my own entertainment. You can create your own stories when interacting with other people, whether that be in a competitive or cooperative setting. Jailbreak has that hidden ability to make other people come in contact with one another, and because that's so hard to predict, to find boring, a player is looking to see what fun they can have with others rather than the game itself. So this is the long answer for how a game gets popular. They have identifiable roles and lots of depth to invest your time into. And the reason you keep coming back to them is the potential variety so that no time is spent the same. No matter what though, I believe the game can do everything right, but it's up to a player in the end to decide whether or not it's worth enjoying for very long. That's because every game is vulnerable to its audience getting tired with it, growing too old, or finding something new and different to play. And because no game has ever remained number one forever in the past, Jailbreak will eventually fade or be replaced. It could take months or years still, but while it's here to stay, hopefully you know why that's the case. No popular game is ever bad. It's achieved that status for a reason, appealing to a bunch of people by being diverse, deep, and different. And on that note, thank you for taking the time to watch, and I hope to see you again soon.